want to do is continue and do a little bit of work on this work in progress. So as you can see, we've got a painting of a pheasant here against a rather weirdly coloured and weirdly textured landscape. And this is actually a painting I started, it's painted with acrylic. So you can see some of the kind of the texture and the scratch marks I put into the paint to create the foliage in the foreground. And I started this painting probably about 3 years ago now. There's some of the texture in the more distant countryside, and here's some of the more distant bushes. So it's a very loose representation of the countryside. And then I've got this rather wonderfully coloured bright pheasant as the main subject. So I'm going to go in now with some interactive acrylic and work on top of this pheasant to kind of bring it more to life. Now, if any of you saw the painting that I did last week of the Angus bull, then you'll know that I was working with permanent alizarin for more or less the first time. So I thought I'd add some of that to my palette once again. And the other colour I was using for the first time was cadmium yellow deep. And so this deep and rich red that I'm putting on here is a mixture of those two colours. I've switched to a slightly larger brush now, and I'm just adding some pure phthalo blue to begin to refine the neck a little more. And I've switched to a small round brush now, and I've mixed in some burnt umber in with the blue, and that's going to give me some really deep shadows here. I've also added just a touch of the red that I used just a moment ago, so that colour combo is hopefully going to work reasonably well. And we can use that same colour to start to add a little bit of definition around the eye. And we'll come back to the eye in a little bit, just to pick out some highlights and so on. Now there's a certain amount of iridescence on the feathers of a pheasant, and consequently, you get a whole range of colours. And so we're going to try and mimic that effect fairly loosely, though. So I'm just adding a mixture of magenta, the alizarin, or alizarin I should say, and the blue, the phthalo blue I was using. And I'm just applying that with, I guess it's about an inch wide flat brush over the top of the colours that I've put down already. And then we'll try something which I haven't done for a little while now, but but we'll see how well it works in just a second. So keeping the brushwork fairly loose and broad. Just added some blue to the mix. I'm going to put in some shadow regions. I just gave the painting a quick spray with the water bottle just to keep the interactives nice and fluid, to allow me to get some blending going. And we'll use that dark colour to deepen the shadows on this leg. And there's a bit more shadow in there as well. And so what I'm going to try now is another quick spray with the water bottle. And I've got a rather stiff bristled decorator's brush here, which is also wet, but just with clean water. And what I'm going to do is just drag that through the paintwork that I've just done. And that's worked quite nicely, actually. That's started to lift off just a little bit of the top coat of paint. And produced a nice speckled effect to reveal in part some of those colours that I'd had on the original work in progress. So that's worked rather nicely. And now, while that paint is still wet, I'm just going to blend in some orange. So I've just added a little bit of the cadmium yellow deep to the red that I used for the face. So I'm getting a little bit of loose colour mixing going on here. But that's working quite nicely. I'm going to keep that colour, even though it's not truly accurate. I'm going to keep it moving over here for the tail, and then we'll come back and adjust that in just a moment. Now I've added some titanium white and a little bit more of the cad yellow deep to that same mix, and I'm going to use that to pick out some highlights. And as you're working away doing this, you can just adjust the colour on your brush slightly by adding a little bit of extra white. And if you don't mix things too thoroughly, then you'll get some automatic colour mixing as you put your brush down. And the trick really though is you don't want to fiddle too much, because otherwise if you're working wet in wet, you'll tend to get just a lot of browns mixed in, which depends what you're doing, but it's probably not the effect that you want. So having added some highlights to the body, I've now mixed in some titanium white with the blue, and I'll use that same brush to pop in few highlights on the head. And the addition of a little bit of yellow transforms that light blue into a lovely coral green. And we'll just, include a few touches of that around the neck. And perhaps just a little flick up here, nearer the face as well. So switching over to the tail, I'm going to just drag a light brown across the layer of orange that I put down before. That's giving it a little bit of a greenish hue actually to the tail, but I don't mind too much there, so we'll leave that as it is for the moment. But then I'm going to pick up a little bit of white on the brush and a bit more of the burnt umber. And we'll just drag that across the top. That's more the effect I was after. The second brush stroke introduced a highlight. Returning now to the deep dark colour that I used for some of the details on the face, I just want to, using my small round brush, really darken some of these shadows on the feet and the legs there. And we'll continue with that for the underside of the body as well, just to help strengthen the shadows, but also make some of the other colours pop a little bit more. Because obviously the contrast levels that we have in our painting, helps determine the sense of light that we create. Now I've just mixed up a fairly deep purple, and I'm going to use that to enhance the shadows down here and just blend them in with some of the lighter colours and the tail. So that those two flow together rather better than they were. And I also want to just pick up a little bit of a subdued highlight here. So I've just mixed in a little bit of white. But the transition from light to dark here is a little bit harsher than I wanted, so I'm just coming in with a clean wet brush again. And we'll just lift off some of that. Just wipe the brush on a towel. There we go. So that softened the transition there quite nicely. And I might just continue that a little bit down here. Let's see what happens. That's a bit better there as well. Okay, so getting reasonably close to completion now. I want to go back to the head and refine some of that.